The big story today, showdown from Main Street to Wall Street, taking action against our nation's biggest banks for their role in the ongoing Fraudclosure disaster and precipitous decline in American tax revenue caused by the financial crisis. Good afternoon to you. I am Dylan Ratigan. Gloomy weather again today here in New York, but also signs the clouds may be breaking on Fraudclosure and the bank scams that have brought America's fiscal condition to its knees. First to Ohio, where hundreds of protesters today descended on the J.P. Morgan Chase annual shareholder meeting, demonstrating against the bank outside and inside, confronting the big boss, Jamie Dimon, over what they call unfair foreclosure practices. Meantime, back in New York, newly elected Attorney General Eric Schneiderman making a promising move. Instead of waiting for federal, state, and civil suits to shake out, Schneiderman is going it solo, opening an investigation into three of Wall Street's biggest banks for their handling of mortgage securities operations during the big credit scam. For too long, the anecdotes and accusations have been ignored. But now, finally, investigations and new evidence that big-name lenders are not only cheating American homeowners, but swindling and have been swindling the American government as well. The Huffington Post has exclusively obtained details from official government audits of the five biggest mortgage companies. In those documents, accusations that lenders are effectively cheating taxpayers in the bank's handling of foreclosures and in the bank's handling of government-backed loans. Now, if we wait to see if Attorney General Holder files any charges, we might all die and roll over. But fortunately, there are a few attorneys general in this country who see the injustice and have the courage to take on the daunting task of dealing with the corrupt relationship between American banking and American government. Could we at long last be at a turning point in the shell game that is American finance and its relationship with government and housing? Joining us now is a man leading the protest today in Ohio, George Gale, executive of the National People's Action, which works for economic and racial justice. George, what was the goal of today's protest?
It was really to take a message to Jamie Dimon and J.P. Morgan Chase and say enough is enough. You guys crashed the economy. Years later, you've done nothing to fix what you've broken. And so it's time to reduce principal on hundreds of thousands of mortgages, cut out the predatory lending, and finally start investing in small businesses in America. People are fed up. The great resistance, of course, is to do any debt write-downs. The banks, as you know, would suffer tremendously in any negotiation like that. Do you have any thought that you or any attorney general will ever get them to let their cold, dead hands off of that principle, which really is, for many of them, the difference between survival and failure? I think we've given them more than enough gifts, and it's about time they return the favor to the American people. So we're going to continue to put pressure directly on Jamie Dimon and J.P. Morgan Chase, as well as B of A and Wells. And now we may have a new hero in Eric Schneiderman. So this is some of the best news we've had in a long time.
What would you like to see him do?
I'd like to see him aggressively investigate the banks and not be like some of the other attorney generals who've been taking money from the big banks to foster the next campaign.
Tom Miller is the guy who's claimed to be settling the banks, and as soon as he announced the banks, he started collecting money from the banks and then decided it wasn't a problem. I thought that was illegal, but anyway, it's funny to watch.
If it's not illegal, it really should be. I mean, American homeowners shouldn't have to wonder if the elected official leading the investigation is more accountable to the banks or to the people that he represents. Yeah. It's a real problem in America.
I laugh because I'm over crying, George. It's pretty absurd. If you look at the relationship between the collapse in American revenue the past few years that has come as a direct result of the spike in unemployment and the collapse in the housing market, do you think that most people in America understand how directly responsible for our deficit crisis the banks are in driving that housing bubble and unemployment collapse?
I think people really do. I think a lot of people think we're in a revenue crisis and that the banks both crashed the economy, but they also continue to strip wealth away from everyday Americans and the economy. So there's a growing sentiment out there that we need to take on the financial sector, take on Wall Street, and really actually hold corporations accountable in a way that we haven't in the past.
Yeah, you know, as you know, George, I don't have it in for the banks one way or the other. I just believe in banks that are allowed to fail and have to make money by lending. I don't doubt that you disagree with that. More broadly, we see a lot of dysfunction in this country from the banking system because we don't have investment in our country. Is there a banking model that you see in the world that you think is better?
I think we need to get banking back more to the community level. I mean, there was a time that if a bank was not doing the right thing in your city or in your neighborhood, you actually could figure out how to get a meeting with the bank president, and the bank president lived in that city or that community. But now, as we've seen today, when we came to the J.P. Morgan Chase shareholder meeting, we had to figure out how to cross a moat. They had 10 police officers to every banker there. These guys are gated off and live in a protected world and don't have to deal with everyday Americans. So we need to figure out how to move more capital back to communities where everyday people have real access to it and real control of it. And I agree with you. If banks mess up at that level, they need to fail. If the American people mess up at the level, we pay a price for it. And I think one of the biggest, most popular ideas out there, and one of the most populist ideas, is actually busting some of these guys up because they've clearly gotten too big and it's dangerous for all of us.
Yeah, listen, George, a pleasure. Good luck with your efforts. George Gale trying to add to the volume of the voice that is the injustice and ultimate extraction of wealth from America from a government-funded multi-trillion-dollar giant banking system. We don't get the investment, we don't get the lending, and of course the guys at the top of the banks collect more money than most any